Okay, thank you for the beautiful introduction, and thank you, Pastor Doug, for the invitation, and Dave as well. As they mentioned, my name is Adrian Stancu, if you can say that. That's Romanian. And the last communist president was Ceausescu. So it kind of goes with the traditional Romanian names. But just a few words about myself, besides from what was already said. I was born and raised in Romania, in the capital city in Bucharest. I went to school there I did my engineering studies in computer engineering. So I'm familiar with engineering methods, scientific studies, technical investigations. I work for a medical device company called Baxter Healthcare. And my education actually is quite diverse. After I graduated from the engineering school, I went to seminary in the Netherlands. I studied for about 3 years at the American seminary over there, and then I came to the Chicagoland, and I got another master's degree at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, focusing on church history. So my passion is history, archaeology, biblical studies. In terms of hobbies, I like history, apologetics, archaeology. I like the Bible. Parenting takes a lot of my time. We have 5 children with my beautiful wife, Adina. The 3 older ones are in college already. And I like traveling. We like traveling. We do a lot of traveling almost every year. Last year we've been to Italy and Romania, and I've been to many countries in Europe, almost all of them. But it is true, I also like music. I play a few instruments, and I also play at church quite a bit. But I also actually serve as a teaching elder in our church. But just a fun fact that I was raised in a communist country, which is behind the Iron Curtain, is the fact that, and maybe some of you are aware even from a distance, in the communist time we had a lot of restrictions, limitations in terms of freedom, in terms of freedom of worship, and some Christians were even persecuted. They went to prison. A good example would be Pastor Richard Wurmbrand. Maybe some of you know him. He was the founder of Voice of the Martyrs. He grew up in Romania. As he was born and raised as a Jew, he became a Christian. He was a communist too. He spent about 14 years in prison for serving the Lord. And I have some experience with being raised in a communist country. But okay, I guess enough about myself. This picture is actually from Jordan, from Mount Nebo, which is right on top of one of the sites that is considered possibly to be the site where the ancient city of Sodom was. And in the background, actually, you can see the Jordan Valley. And on the other side of the valley is Jerusalem. But in any case, so tonight we want to talk about the well-known story of Sodom in Genesis. Can that be true? A lot of people deny that it ever happened. They think it's just a story or a myth. But in Genesis, we read in several places, beginning with, I think, chapter 13 all the way to 19, about this place. And in Genesis 19, it says that the Lord, and this is the part where we see the extraordinary phenomenon that happened and how this place disappeared. It says, Genesis 19, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven. Verse 28, Abraham looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw a dark smoke like smoke from a furnace. Can this be true? And I think the answer is yes. We have a lot of clues that there are so many things around the Dead Sea that point to a place like it is described in Sodom, that was destroyed. So somewhere around the Dead Sea, people were searching for a long time for this place. They were digging, looking for this place. And tonight I want to start with this question, that if a city can be burned with fire, brimstone from heaven, if it existed around 4,000 years ago in the time of Abraham, and at the end of the day, can we say that the Bible is reliable in what it tells us, or is just a tale, just a story or a tale of morality? So tonight I want to, as we pursue this search for Sodom, I want to evaluate the case for this place, looking at 4 different aspects, looking at the text of the Bible, at some traditions about the city of Sodom that are outside of the Bible, the evidence that archaeology found in 2 specific locations around the Dead Sea that seem to indicate that there was a place like Sodom is described in the book of Genesis, and also the time of those archaeological finds that were discovered. And as we look at these 4 different pieces of evidence, I want to evaluate 2 possibilities, possible locations for Sodom. One would be in the south of the Dead Sea. It's one of the older hypotheses that Sodom might be located in the south of the Dead Sea by the Sodom Valley. And there is a newer theory or hypothesis that Sodom could be located northeast of the Dead Sea by the Jericho Valley. So we'll start with looking at this hypothesis called the south location hypothesis. There is a place in the south of Dead Sea. It's called in Arabic, it's called Babadra. And this idea was promoted especially by the American professor William Albright, who was a well-known archaeologist and biblical scholar. And actually his main statement was that in the south of the Dead Sea, there could have been the so-called cities of the plain. And he came with this idea around the 1920s, 1924. And he conducted an expedition. I'll just go over this quote from one of his writings. The primary purpose of the joint expedition was to secure evidence, throwing light on the obscure but fascinating problem of the cities of the plain, especially Sodom, Gomorrah, and Zoar, which persistent biblical and post-biblical tradition locates at the southern end of the Dead Sea. So his statement is that the cities of the Bible were on the southern end of the Dead Sea. Let's look more at the text of the scripture. Try to understand what the book of Genesis says. Where was Sodom located, right? So in looking at the geography based on the text. So what we read, there is a verse in Genesis 10 that seems to indicate the borders of the land of Canaan. And it says the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon back up in the north, where Lebanon is today, toward Gerar as far as Gaza. So here is the Gaza that we have on the news lately. And then it says toward Sodom and Gomorrah, but we don't know exactly. Okay, so it looks like there's like a perimeter of the land, but where Sodom or Gomorrah would be, I guess the verse could imply that it would make sense if it's either in the north or of the south. It kind of defines the eastern border of the land, right? So that's one place where the text talks about the location of Sodom. Let's look more at the evidence that we find in the book of Genesis. Maybe you remember this place, Genesis 14. It talks about a conflict between 2 armies, right? And it says that the two armies, Genesis 14 verse 8, two armies marched in battle lines, and it specifies the place in the valley of Siddim. There were 4 kings against 5 kings. There was a coalition from the north against the coalition of Sodom and Gomorrah. But now look at this, verse 10. Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits. The original word is Haimar. And when the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some of the men fell into the tar pits, and the rest of them fled to the hills. Okay. So back in the time, around Dead Sea, there were some tar pits, right? And this valley of Siddim, it's indeed located on the southern end of the Dead Sea. The question is there any evidence of tar pits by the Dead Sea, around the Dead Sea? I don't know if any of you was aware of that, but the answer is yes. These are a couple of pictures of tar pits from the Dead Sea, or asphalt pits that contain petroleum. In the old times, in the Roman times, it used to be called Lake Asphaltites, from asphalt, right? Also, there's another picture south of the Dead Sea. Not only tar pits, some of them end up in like sinkholes. They sink with whatever is under the ground. So, and all this material, asphalt or tar, petroleum, was used back in the time also in construction, in building boats or ships. Even when it says that Moses was put in the basket in Exodus, it says that was sealed with tar. And it was used a lot by Egyptians, which was the largest, the biggest power of the time, for their mummification, for medical purposes. And all this evidence of tar pits and sinkholes are, for the most part, in the south of the Dead Sea. See, there is even a sign. As you drive on different roads, there is a sign in 3 languages, right? I think it's on the Israel side. Be aware of the sinkholes in the area. So it is. If you travel, you might run and you might see some of these sinkholes and tar pits in Jordan and in Israel. I'll put a couple of questions or comments at this point. Can a large city like Sodom, the way it is described in Genesis, be built near sinkholes? Probably not. But then it says the kings and their soldiers fell into the tar pits. That means the king and the soldiers were not aware of the tar pits in that region, if they really fell in them. So apparently, those tar pits where the battle was were not very close to Sodom, right? Or they just opened at that time, it just happened. Let's move forward. The book of Genesis chapter 19, verse 24. This is where it says, the Lord rained down, what words are used here? Burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of heaven. Verse 28 of Genesis 19, Abraham looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and he saw a dense, dark smoke like smoke from a furnace. Okay, I generated some artificial intelligence images right here, but maybe it looked like that. You tell me if it's pretty decent. But so burning sulfur, and it was seen by Abraham from a distance. Is there any evidence of burning or sulfur balls? Is also called brimstone in the area of the Dead Sea? The answer is yes. In different parts around the Dead Sea, people can go, and in that like sandy soil, they can dig with whatever tool and find these brimstone sulfur balls. Some of them, actually, you can even buy it as a souvenir from the Dead Sea, it looks like, right? You get a certificate. This is original from the Dead Sea brimstone. After so many, around 4,000 years, they are still there. And when you light them, they would start a fire. They'll be on fire. I don't know, I have this little video, I don't know if it works. Yep. That's brimstone on fire from the Dead Sea. Actually, this, it's very interesting. This subject was so fascinating for the last 10, 15 years. As you can see, this little video is from National Geographic. So when you go home, you can go ahead and watch the presentation, the National Geographic series on Sodom and Gomorrah. It's a really good one, okay? And that's where this little clip comes from. So, Genesis 19, the Lord rained down burning sulfur. And we have burning sulfur even now after 4,000 years around the Dead Sea, right? So, when it says in Genesis 19 that Abraham looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and he saw the dark smoke, where was Abraham at that time when he looked and saw the smoke? Genesis 19 says Abraham was in the city or place called Hebron, right? And Hebron is just south of Jerusalem, up on the hill. So south of Jerusalem would be Bethlehem, and then Hebron, more down here, Masada. But from Hebron, you would see down the hill, you would see the Dead Sea, and you would be able to see the cities that are down the hill. Either if it's the one in the north or if it's in the south, you would see both of them from Hebron would be around 20 miles distance. If you look down the hill, you would see that if it's a lot of smoke, like the smoke from a furnace, like it says here. Now, there's also extra biblical evidence for Sodom. We call it tradition, right? So we do have records about Sodom and Gomorrah that are not in the Bible. And I have a couple of them, maybe actually 3 points here. One, it was this Greek geographer and historian called Strabo before Jesus. And he mentions in one of his works, Geographica, he mentioned the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So they knew, the Greeks knew, there was a Sodom and Gomorrah that was destroyed. Did he know from the Jewish Bible? There was just another tradition. Strabo mentions that. He describes the region around the Dead Sea. He describes the Dead Sea that is called Lake Asphaltides, that the area was barren, devoid of life, that was at that time covered with salt and sulfur. It was sulfur at that time before Christ. And he suggested that Sodom was close to Masada, which, okay, Masada is south of Jerusalem. And he said that was destroyed due to natural disasters like an earthquake and the release of gases and fires from the ground, which is true. Those phenomena happen around the Dead Sea. Not only the Greek geographer, but also the famous Josephus Flavius, who wrote after Jesus Christ in the time of the apostles. He also mentions the cities of the plain that are in the south around Lake Asphaltides, again, if we use the same term. And in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews, he also mentions that the area where Sodom and Gomorrah stood was, at that time in the first century, was barren, was covered with sulfur and ashes. And Josephus attributes the destruction to fire and brimstone from God. He pretty much follows the book of Genesis, which he does in most of his writing. So 2 extra biblical witnesses about Sodom and Gomorrah. And there is one more, there is a map. If you go to Jordan, there is a place, a city called Madaba. In that place, in Madaba, there is a Greek Orthodox church. I think it's called the Church of St. George. But on the floor, there is an old mosaic, a map on the floor, right? From the 6th century, so let's say around 550 after Christ. Very interesting map. This map is like the oldest map of ancient Israel or the Holy Land, you know, the first map of the Holy Land. What you see on the map, which is incomplete right now, but right here on the map, you see this, in the center is the Dead Sea, this kind of lake shape. That's the Dead Sea. And the river, Which river goes into the Dead Sea? Anyone? Yes, Jordan comes from the north. So this would be the north. The way it's shown here in the picture is kind of is not oriented properly. But Jordan comes from the north into the Dead Sea. And right here is Jerusalem, which is kind of the center point of the map, is the city of Jerusalem. And there is a much better view of that in here, where it actually shows the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and other places in Jerusalem with the walls of Jerusalem. But there is this other little detail on the southern part of the Dead Sea on this map. It says there is a city with palms, and the name of the city is Zoar, which is the city where Lot and the family fled to escape the destruction. So the assumption would be that Zoar should not be too far from Sodom, right? Because it says that Lot had to flee early in the morning and to make it to the place of refuge before the destruction of Sodom. But actually there is one more detail. Right here on the north side of the Dead Sea, there is another city. You can see the palms and kind of half of the same kind of shape of a city, but we don't have the name. However, because it is on the map, people assume it was an important city, and some people assume this could have been Sodom. That's why I put a question mark here. We don't know. This is what is left of the map. But according to this map, is it 100% accurate? We don't know. It's a tradition from 550, and based on the other documents or writings, historical writings, they knew that a city of Zoar, where Lot fled, was around the Dead Sea on the southern side, which probably could be true. Now, we'll go into the more specific site in the south of the Dead Sea, where there was a lot of archaeological digging, and this would be the students or the expedition organized by Albright in the probably, his initial idea came in the 20s. I think the main digs, they started in the 60s, the primary excavations, and continued into the 70s. Albright and his students. But there is this site in the south of the Dead Sea called Babadra, where this is the south hypothesis that this could have been the location of Sodom, situated in the south of the Dead Sea. And this is a picture of that place. So it shows that it was an early Bronze Age place, city, that had also a gate. And down there you can see the valley, which is the lowest point of the earth. The Dead Sea, and especially the southern part, and that's the lowest place on the earth. Also in this site, conforming according to the archaeological findings, there was a large cemetery, and there was some evidence of a layer of ash, so destruction by fire. So those are some of the important findings in the site. That's another picture of the ruins. One more detail, not far from this place, Babadra, there is another ancient site. It's called Numeira, and some of the researchers assume that can be identified as Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah, in which this other additional site is 20 kilometers south of Babadra. How about the timing? Those who study and did the archaeological dig in the south, according to the best dating methods that they had, they came to the conclusion that this place, Babadra, which some people consider that could be Sodom, actually was destroyed. So it was not inhabited after 2350 before Christ. And the conservative date for Abraham, according to the most conservative scholars, is around 2000 before Christ. So can this be, according to the dating and the timing, can this be Sodom? If this was already destroyed 300 years before Abraham. Is this a good, does it make sense? Moreover, the second site was destroyed 300 years prior to Babadra. So Numera, which is considered to be Gomorrah. So they were not destroyed at the same time. They did not disappear at the same time. So this is one of the strongest arguments, I guess, that these two sites cannot be associated with Abraham, unfortunately, because of the timing of when they ceased to exist. Okay? So, a quick summary of what we've learned about this location. So, there is a hypothesis that Sodom could be in the south of the Dead Sea, in this place called Babadra. After we evaluate the findings, okay, it's close to the Siddim Valley. There are a lot of tar pits, sulfur balls in the area, yes. But one point is not located in the geographical area that's described in Genesis 13, and we'll go to that next. That's the best place where the location of Sodom is described in Genesis. And then both of these places, Babadra and Numeira, were destroyed at different times, about 250, 300 years apart. And both were destroyed hundreds of years before the time of Abraham. Okay, so I guess a lot of the scholars come to a conclusion that maybe this is not the best candidate for where Sodom is, although the location might make sense, right? Okay, so now what is the second option? So there is a second hypothesis. This is a much newer development in the archaeological search for Sodom. So the second one talks about the north locations, or the north hypothesis. And there is this place that's called Tal el Hammam. Let's call it Hammam, short. This place is on the north side of the Dead Sea. Any of you travel to Jordan? Okay. Any of you went to Amman, the capital of Jordan? Okay. Any of you went to Mount Nebo, close to Amman, where Moses was and he saw the land from Mount Nebo? This place is very close to Mount Nebo. As you go from Amman, I went from Amman to the Jordan River, to the traditional Baptist side of Jesus. As I went from Amman to the Jordan River, you pass on that road right by this site. Right now, this site is really famous. I went there a few years ago, but right now it's really famous. If you travel from Amman to Jordan River, look for signs, because you might see a sign that says Sodom nowadays. It's a new development, and it's becoming really popular. They're still digging, but it's known to the public, so people can go and see the site. So this location, Tal el Hammam, was proposed by Dr. Stephen Collins, an American archaeologist. He's from New Mexico, Trinity Southwest University. And he started digging in 2005. He came with the idea around 2000. He looked for approvals. He started digging in 2005, so about 20 years ago. And they kept digging for about 16 years in this location. And what they found is amazing. But let's go back to the text before I talk about archaeological finds. Going back to the text of Genesis and asking the question one more time, where is Sodom located? If you read in Genesis, and the main text for location is Genesis chapter 13. Okay? In Genesis 13, it says that Abraham was with his relative, Lot. They arrived in Canaan. They are very wealthy in livestock, flocks, herds. And he says in chapter 13, they started arguing, actually not them, the people who were taking care of their herds, right? Their servants. They were fighting over land and pasture, right? And Abraham, who is older, who is the senior, says to Lot, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, because we are brothers. Actually, they're not brothers. They are relatives, right? He was older. He was like uncle. But he was nice. I don't know how you handle conflicts with people if you are as nice as Abraham. But he was really nice. He said, we are brothers. And he says, it's not the whole land before you. Let's separate. If you are going to choose to go to the left, I'll go to the right and the other way around. So he tells Lot, you make your choice, right? And I'll have whatever is left. What did Lot choose? That's the next verse, right? Genesis 13. What does it say? Genesis 13 verse 10. This is the place that describes where Sodom is. It says, Lot looked around. So, okay, he has to make a choice for his business, for his life, for his herds, right? He looked around. He saw the whole plain of the Jordan. How was it? Very well watered. A lot of water. And it describes, it compares, is like the garden of the Lord. That's really nice. If it says like the garden of the Lord. That's how the writer, Moses says, put it, right? Like, and then it says, it's like the land of Egypt. Which river runs through the land of Egypt? Nile. Very fertile around Nile in Egypt. Was Moses aware of how Egypt looks like? How fertile is the land of Egypt where the Nile flows? Moses knew. And Moses says, this place that Lot saw in the plain of Jordan was like the land of Egypt. That means very fertile, a lot of water. So Lot chose for himself the plain of Jordan, and he journeyed east and pitched his tents near Sodom, right? The word for the plain of the Jordan, the plain in Hebrew is called kikar. It means a round or a disc. So it's an area where the Jordan flows into the Dead Sea that is like a round, fertile area. Okay, here it is. This is where Jordan goes into the Dead Sea, and this would be that round kikar, the plain. This would be the plain. The word is the round plain of Jordan. Where were Abraham and Lot when they made the choice? When he looked down and saw the plain that was first, where were they? What was the location? Well, Genesis 13 says they were at this place called Bethel. It says Bethel and Ai, Genesis 13. Where is Bethel? Bethel is right here, just north of Jerusalem. What do you see from Bethel? So because we know where Bethel is, we can imagine what they saw when they party, right? Because we know exactly, Bethel was there, is there today. It was there in Jesus' time. It was there in Abraham's time. It never changed the location. So they're right here by Bethel and Ai, on the hills. These are the hills by Jerusalem. Lot and Abraham Lot looks down, it says. He looked down and he saw the whole plain of Jordan that was well watered, fertile like the land of Egypt. It makes sense, right? It's the Jordan, and moreover, it's not just Jordan. There is other springs here too, on the left and on the right that flow to Jordan. And it is one of the most fertile spots around Jerusalem here, and Amman. And then he traveled from Bethel east. It just says, he traveled from Bethel somewhere this way, where there was this fertile land, and pitched his tent, it says, near Sodom. So based on this text, it's very powerful, this text. It looks like the place where Sodom is, it should be somewhere around the plain of Jordan, right? Agree? Can it be in the south? Based on this text? Anyone can argue is in the south? Some do. How do they argue? You know what they say? It says, oh, okay, this was a nice place. But it says he journeyed and pitched his tents near Sodom. So he journeyed from here, he traveled all the way in the barren land, desolate land of the south. Would that be acceptable? What do you think? Would that be a good place for his cattle and business and life? Well, but some people argue it that way. Okay. To me, it makes a lot of sense based on Genesis 13, that from Bethel, he saw the plain, he traveled, and he moved right there where Sodom is by the plain of Jordan. And imagine Sodom, which is this very big, important city in the book of Genesis. Who would build a city in the desert down here? By the brimstone and potholes and whatever, gases and what. So based on that, where is the most probable location of Sodom? Based on the text, Genesis 13, would be right here in the Kikar, or the plain of the Jordan. That's where the direction where they look like, and that's based on Genesis 13, that's the most probable location of Sodom. And it says, Genesis 14, that Lot and his family moved to Sodom. Well, at the beginning in 13 actually, it says he pitched his tent. Next chapter, it says they are in Sodom. He gave up the tent life. Would you like to be in a tent? Everybody would like the city life and a nice house, right? Well, Lot made his choice. He said, Uncle, forget about tent life. I'm moving to the city. Okay? And he moved to Sodom. Okay, I generated another image here. I don't know. Let's see if it compares to the real image that the scientists generated in a few slides. But see, okay, but at least you see the Jordan Valley, right? You see the Jordan Valley, you see that it's fertile, you know, and you see this will be the east side towards Amman, and this would be the west side towards Jerusalem, right? Okay, so they were here on the hill. He saw the valley, he chose the valley, he was in a tent for a while, and then next chapter, lo and behold, he's in the city, nice house. Okay, let's look more at the evidence. This is a Google map. I took it this morning or yesterday. Google map. Right now, if you go to Jordan, Amman, and look from Amman towards the Jordan River, you see this site. It's called Tal El Hammam. And it's right here on the hills. Right, see, this is the green area, this is the valley, and one of these little hills, it's the site of Tal El Hammam. Beautiful site. And on the other side, you see Jerusalem and Bethel. This is where they argued, where they saw the land, and Lot moved here, and Abraham remained on that side. That's why actually Lot became the father of the Ammonites and the Moabites. It makes sense, right? He was the father of the Moabites and the Ammonites because he moved here. And Abraham remained the father of the Jews, of the Hebrews, because he stayed on this side. That's what the Bible says, and that's what happened. Okay, this is a little video clip. Let's see if it works. Okay, this is the side. If you drive with a car, beautiful site on a hill. Comes again from the same really nice video from National Geographic. But see, you see a site like an old city that it started to be explored in 2005, and you see the Jordan Valley. That's another picture that shows that's the archaeological site of Tal El Hammam, and you see the Jordan Valley in the background. By the way, this name El Hammam, it's the Arabic name. It means the mount of the hot baths. There are water springs right there in the area, on top of the Jordan River. There's fresh water, and one of the springs is a warm spring, right there. Maybe when you go, search it out. Even today, there's so this place was chosen really carefully for some good reasons, right? when they built this city here. And so Professor Collins started digging in 2005, and for the last 20 years they kept digging. This is all fresh. All these pictures are new. This is the site of Tal el Hammam. Is this Sodom? It could be. You know, these are houses. You know, these were streets, houses, big site, very big site. So the evidence, it was a very large Middle Bronze Age city that was in existence 4,000 years ago. And this is how it looks like, you know, after they started digging and discovering. Another big site. It looks beautiful even now. It's going to be one of the main attractions in Jordan. Whenever you go, you are going to visit this site. Actually, they say this is the largest Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley. So from the time of Abraham, there is nothing larger than this place. In the whole region, measurements, everything that's within the walls of the city, 65 acres. Is that a big piece of land, a real estate? 65 acres? This is a big place. It's not this a little small. Actually, it says the city of David in Old Jerusalem, you can fit 7 cities of David in this place. 7 times larger than the ancient city of David, who was the main power of years after Abraham, right? But this place was much bigger in the time of Abraham. And here is the real reconstruction based on the place. What do we see here? We see a lower city with walls, not only walls, walls and towers. It's one of the first ancient cities that has towers in history. There is also an upper city. Right here in the middle is a large structure like a palace. And most importantly, right here by the walls, there is a very large gatehouse. Does it talk about the gate of Sodom in Genesis? Who was at the gate of Sodom? Lot. When the angels came, it says Lot was at the gates of the city. This means over time he was part of the leadership of Sodom. So he became an important person in the city council, right? So he was at the gate. So Genesis talks about the gates. This place has very big gates, okay? And also is very well watered, so springs of water everywhere, right? So this is a very important ancient city in the region. This is a reconstruction of the gate of El Hammam, because it says Genesis 19, Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom right before the destruction, right? So this would have been one of the most impressive gates in the region. The measurements, based on the archaeological finds, would be 70 feet wide. How wide is your house, anyone? If you have a large house, is it 70 feet? No. Who has a large house here? Is it 70 feet? No. Maybe, unless you have a little palace or a mansion. It probably is less. So this gate is bigger than your house. That's a big gate, right? 21 meters wide. Okay. So that's a big gate. Based on the measurements, when you go to that place in Jordan, you might see it. Measure it yourself, okay? But actually, we have an idea of how these gates look like, because there is another ancient city in the north of Israel that actually has some ancient gates, and this is the ancient city of Dan. Dan is right by the border with Syria, by the Golan Heights. And this is one of the earliest and only ancient gate that is still in existence. It didn't collapse yet, from 4,000 years ago. But see, I put it here because I think it looks similar to that gate, to the previous gate. See, these were like the towers. towers on the left, towers on the right. Imagine going up high like towers, and there is a gate system. It's not just like a wall, a large gate. And this is a large gate too. If a person is this big, this might be as big as a house, right? Now, probably one of the most interesting aspect of this archaeological site is the findings when they started digging. Actually, Dr. Stephen Collins said his story, and there is many videos actually on YouTube. You can search it out. I'll make this presentation available. So ask the pastor or Dave for the presentation, so you have all the details. Dr. Collins said before he started digging here, he would take tours to Jordan and Israel. He would take people all the way to the south, and he would follow the old hypothesis that Sodom should be in the south, of the Dead Sea, by the sinkholes. And he would tell people, and then one of these tours he reads again in Genesis 13, and he tells those people, we're going in the south to see Baba Jah. But I tell you honestly, I don't think this is Sodom anymore. No refunds. This is in around 2000 when he changed his mind by reading the Bible. And then he starts digging over here in the north, and he thinks, I think this is Sodom. He's not doing tours anymore. He's pretty old right now. He's not doing tours in the south anymore. And a lot of people, they can still see the site in the south, and a couple of sites, and they're nice. I passed by both of them when I went to Jordan. But the findings here in Hammam were amazing. What are the findings? So they start digging. They come to this big, huge layer of ash, more than a meter. This much ash, 1.5 meters. Layer of ash like never before. It says here about 4 feet. They find pieces of pottery. But it's not just pottery. He looks at it, he's like, he is an expert in pottery. He looks like it, he's like, yeah, this is like ancient pottery from the time of Abraham. But he says, what's the problem with it? It's glazed. It's like melted. How can a pottery in the time of, there was nothing like that in the time of Abraham, melted pottery. Melted bricks and plastered. Melted pieces of metal like platinum, nickel, gold. Metals that melt at temperatures higher than 2000 degrees Celsius. Some of these elements melted at temperatures like the temperature of the sun, blown apart structures, scattered remains of human bones, and a very unusual high salt concentration. So the main discovery were all these melted materials, like melted glazed pottery. And the assumption was there was some very unusual fire or high temperature or explosion that could have caused that destruction of this place. Based on the discoveries, they take it to a lab. Initially a lab in New Mexico, because he knew the place. They take it to a lab. They take these pieces of melted pottery to the lab. And the research people in the lab, they look at it and they say, where did you get this? They call it trinitite. I never knew about that word before. What is trinitite? Trinitite is melted sand from New Mexico from the time of the atomic bomb testing in New Mexico in the 1944-45. The people in the lab say, where did you get this trinitite? Is this from the atomic bomb in New Mexico? He's like, nope. This is from Jordan. Are you kidding me? The same kind of high temperatures that an atomic bomb produced and melted sand and rocks and material in New Mexico, he brings it from digging in Jordan. So based on those findings, this is amazing. There was an article in 2021 in Nature Scientific Report, unheard of, an article in a prestigious scientific, publication that says, and you can find it online, a Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tal El Hammam, which is a middle bronze city in the Jordan Valley. By the way, this article became the most downloaded access scientific paper in history because of all these unusual, extraordinary pieces of information, because it was mentioned that could be associated with the ancient city of Sodom, but also became the most criticized article in history. They removed it several times. They had to make corrections because there's people who didn't like what it says, and many other publications. It was like a wave of the news. In the Forbes magazine, studies suggest that the Tunguska-sized explosion destroyed the city over 3,000 years ago. In the scientific news, another explosion impact destroyed the Jordan Valley city. In Nature, like I mentioned, right? On the news, on YouTube, you're going to go home and search it out. You're going to find this Rosenberg report. You're going to find the National Geographic, the History Channel reports on this, okay? So this is from that scientific paper. The conclusion, there was a group of, I think, 15 experts, PhD, experts, professors, who say, based on the evidence, there could have been like a catastrophic event, like a cosmic explosion of an atomic bomb magnitude, an explosion of a meteorite in the air on top of the place that did not create a crater, but it just created an explosion, right? And destroyed those places, including Tal El Hammam and the cities around. Almost there. How about the dating? So when Dr. Collins was digging in this place next to Amman, Tal El Hammam, based on the dating of the findings, the melted pottery and everything, that explosion occurred around 1700, 1650, or 1700 BC, right? Is this during the time of Abraham? Yes. People who say, well, no, because Abraham was around 2000. Well, that's where the debate is. He comes to the, or he tries to argue that actually Abraham was right before that destruction. His argument is that when you try to put a bunch of the numbers in the Old Testament, if you try to put them together, some of them cannot be interpreted literally, Not every the geography, the description of geographical places in the Bible is very accurate, but with the numbers sometimes you might not come to a good conclusion just adding them. And a conclusion. So for the north location hypothesis, when we evaluate all the findings, what can we say? Well, number one, according to Genesis 13, we can say that the location of Tal El Hammam aligns with the description in Genesis 13. Agree? Everyone agree? Kind of, that aligns pretty good. Another piece of evidence, well, this place is a very large city and it has gates. That one aligns too, right? Right. Check. And another piece of evidence, there is strong evidence of a catastrophic destruction around 1700 BC. Check, right? Okay, so we have, the only question mark is the timing, right? So this is my conclusion. If you put the two, and this is my last slide. If you put the two together, in terms of location, the one in the south, okay, is in the south where the sinkholes are. The other one is by the Jordan Valley. In terms of geographical location, the one in the south doesn't fit with Genesis 13. But this one east of Bethel, yeah, check, fits. In terms of size and importance, yeah, the one in the north is much bigger. Actually, it's 5 times bigger than the one in the south. So we check for the one in the north. In terms of gates, oh yeah, the one in the north has much bigger gates. We saw that. In terms of the time, that's where the kind of the question marks came, and some people are still skeptical. Well, but still, the one in the south, if it was destroyed 2,300 before Abraham, is too early. The one in the north was destroyed about 1,700. Maybe that's where Abraham lived. Let's do more research on that one. In the south, there was no catastrophic destruction, but in the north, yes. And in the north, we also have not only catastrophic destruction, extreme signs of destruction, like melted pottery, extreme heat, and so on and so forth. So which one is the strongest? Based on the evidence, my conclusion is the one in the north. You make up your mind. This is what I found. I found it really exciting. And thank you, Dave, for provoking me to do the presentation. And I hope you found it interesting too. And I hope you're all going to go home and do your research and watch a few videos and learn more as you go home. Thank you.